So here we are. I'm just going to continue on with our case one of debating with deviant cult members. And I'm just going to go over this every video just so I can drill in these things that when you want to really establish or aim to get when you're actually engaging with these people. It's the five P's, the five pillars. Five P's is principles, which is the Quran and Sunnah. The purpose, establish why you guys are even talking. The priority, make sure you're dealing with things that are the most important than the things that are least important. Proof, make sure that you guys are both using proof and evidence and stay on the same level. If this person is using their own opinions without any proof or evidence, then you could do the same thing. Use your own opinions without proof or anything. Don't let them use their opinions with broad claims with no proof, and then at the same time ask you to prove everything that you're saying. And make sure that it's a parlay. Make sure that it's a two-way conversation. And then the methodology, always use the Quran and Sunnah, and then you want to sprinkle it with common sense, stuff from various Sufi sheikhs that they accept, and their own cult leader, if you know their cult leader teachings enough to do that. And again, be patient, keep the conversation focused, remember the position of leverage that you have, remember the power dynamics, keep yourself in a position of power. Remember the position you have, that you're coming from the Quran and the Sunnah, and you're talking to someone that is not coming from the Quran and Sunnah. And be very clear. Clarity. Be clear and direct. Okay, so let's get right back into it. So, one thing that they like to bring up with this cult of TMOA is they start talking about this legacy of Mubarak Jelani, right? This legacy that he allegedly has, which there is really no legacy. I mean, this guy was he was in Pakistan for 40 years. And if there's any legacy whatsoever of TMOA, the legacy is from the founding fathers and mothers that actually did all the work and did everything without Mubarak Jelani's guidance, direction, or anything. Because the TMOA, if we know the history, going back to the Dar al-Islam, they were already doing all the things that you see that they've done. They were buying properties outside of the cities. They were starting businesses. Their kids were getting out of the alleged ghettos and these different things. These are things that these people's parents, uncles, grandparents, they did all these things. Mubarak Jelani actually didn't do anything besides collect money from them, and so allegedly give them some kind of religious guidance through his videotapes that he'd send over that they actually had to pay for again. So they bring up this thing of legacy, and the quote that he said is, if Allah gives you the permission and the ability to tear down Mubarak Jelani's legacy, then so be it. Well, I got a typo in there, but it's all good. So what he was trying to do was establish that Mubarak Jelani has this kind of great legacy, and because he has this great legacy, and because he's such a great man, and he's done so much for TMOA, and you could choose to debate that point or not. What I did is I went to another route, because he was trying to use this as to say that we can't talk about him, right? We can't bring down his legacy because he's done such great things. We can't talk about any of this alleged bad that he did. So I brought up the example of Elijah Poole, or more commonly known as Elijah Muhammad, right? Elijah Muhammad is the founder of the Nation of Islam, which according to Sunni Islam, anybody that believes in the teachings and the beliefs of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, they are outside of the folds of Islam, right? They have we're not going to get into their beliefs, but they have a lot of beliefs that are similar to actually TMOA. But it's a commonly known thing within the Ummah that they are outside of the fold of Islam. So even though the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad did and do a lot of great things for the African American community, they have a bigger legacy than actually Mubarak Jelani or TMOA has as far as Muslims in the America, right? And I asked him, are we wrong if, as Muslims, we talk about how Elijah Muhammad violated the Quran and Sunnah, how their beliefs take him outside of the fold of Islam? And then he said no. So that's, again, remember I talked about the idea of you have to take their common sense outside of the context of TMOA and get them to stand on something. Then you bring it back inside the context of TMOA Mubarak Jelani, and then possibly they may see the contradiction. Most times they don't, but that's when you'll see they'll jump to another topic, because this is when he jumped after he agreed, like, oh, it's not wrong to talk about Elijah Muhammad, and then realized without saying anything that if I'm saying it's okay to talk about Elijah Muhammad, then I have to logically I have to say it's okay to talk about Mubarak Jelani if Mubarak Jelani is doing the same thing. Okay. The next topic we have here. This is a common one, and you'll remember if you guys have been watching this whole series. Earlier on, they'll try to establish some things with you, and it's all about, this is where the power dynamics work in, right? They'll try to make it out as if you have no idea about what goes on inside of the cult, that you're like this newbie, and especially this guy's an older brother, so he's like, yeah, I've been here from the beginning, and I know what's going on, I know the truth, you're just a young buck and you don't know what's going on. It's a common tactic. Even people that are your same age or even younger than you will try to do the same thing. They think they have this like ultimate understanding of TMOA, okay? And that's basically to try to establish this thing of power over you. You'll see people do it, that especially like people, if they've been over to Pakistan, they'll act like, oh, I have this special knowledge that I know that you don't know because I went to Pakistan and I was with the sheikh directly and I know this and that. And they're like, oh, okay, so what do you know that no one, that everybody else doesn't know? And then they will not be able to verbalize what they supposedly know that nobody else knows. So they'll try to establish that, but then they will directly contradict themselves later on in the conversation when you start establishing facts, when you start establishing proofs, right? When you start establishing all the wrong, like in this context, that Mubarak Jelani, their cult leader, has done, all the haram he's did, all the transgressions he's did, all the violations of the Quran and Sunnah in their beliefs and their actions that have occurred. When you start establishing these things, then they run to because at first they start off like, oh, I know all the stuff that you don't know what goes on in the Jamaat. Then you'll hear them say stuff like this: I've never heard it, I've never seen it, I don't know that to be true, I never heard of that before. You'll hear this time and time again, because when you bring up these things, they'll just say, well, I didn't know about that. Well, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not true. And that's the type of logic they have, is that, well, if I don't know about it, then it must not be true, right? So they went from they know everything that goes on inside the cult to, no, well, I didn't hear about that. I never heard of a halala. I never heard of Mubarak Jelani telling a wife to divorce her husband. I never heard of Mubarak Jelani telling a husband to divorce his wife. I never heard of go on and on and on and on, right? Even to the point where like you'll have people come. I've had people say, I never heard Mubarak Jelani say he's the sixth sultan, right? And it's just a way to cop out, because these people have recognized that there's a problem with the belief in the sixth sultan. So they try to disassociate Mubarak Jelani from that and say, well, I've never heard him say that. Even though every Friday when they go to Juma, they sing a whole song about him being the sixth sultan. But anyway, so we have time to do another slide. All right, so again, got another typo in here, so please excuse the typo. But so not connected. Remember, so we just established that first this guy tried to establish a state of leverage, of being in a higher position, saying that he knows more about what's going on in Jamaat. Then made it clear that he actually doesn't know what's going on in the Jamaat. And then here's a contradiction that you can point out. I didn't point it out to this individual during this conversation, but you're open to point this out, is that you will encounter the people that are actually willing to defend TMOA. They mostly come from this group of people that actually aren't really connected to TMOA. They're people that are like on the outskirts. They may have been like inside TMOA at one point, but because of how TMOA is, with all the different transgressions and wrongs and bad leadership and all these different things that are direct results of the leadership of Mubarak Jelani, they distance themselves. But we call these people redeemers. These people distance themselves, but at the same time hold the sheikh and the Jamaat in this esteemed light, and they don't associate any of the wrong in the Jamaat or in the community, in the cult, with the actual leader. So this is, he starts saying statements like this: I'm not close to the organization. I don't choose to be in the midst like that. I know they got problems. So here's a contradiction, because if you know Mubarak Jelani's teachings, that you're not supposed to distance yourself from his community. This is his community. This is supposedly the best community of all time, better than the Sahabas, right? The only Muslims on the face of the earth. And you're choosing to distance yourself from that. Why? Because you know they have problems. But the issue is that you are not associating those problems with the leader. And a good logical argument here that I like to use if this topic comes up is, a person has two choices. They either have to say that their sheikh is a fraud, one, or you don't have to use those strong words. You can say that their sheikh isn't who he says he is, because that's a common statement. They say, my sheikh is who he says he is. So you have to either say your sheikh isn't who you thought he was, one, or two, your sheikh is incompetent, right? And here's a logical argument that goes with that, because if they acknowledge that the Jamaat has problems, right? So he just acknowledged that the Jamaat has problems. So I could have built off of that right there. Okay, you recognize that there's problems in the Jamaat, so much so that you distance yourself from the Jamaat, right? Okay, who's responsible for those problems? And most people that do that, they'll say, well, it's admin. He has bad admin. It's all the admin. It's K2. It's Khadijah Smith. It's whoever. Fulana. They'll just name anybody. Anybody that they have a personal issue with, right? And you'll say, okay, well, your sheikh says that he knows everything that's going on with every single one of his talibs, and that he directly runs the community, and that his administration hears and obeys what he says, right? So either he's lying about that, which means that he's a fraud, which means that he's not who he says he is, or the only other choice you have of that is that to say that he's an incompetent leader, because he is putting people in charge that don't know what they're doing, that are causing all these issues within the community. Okay, so that's the two choices you have. So I hope this helps. I'm going to stop here, and then we're going to continue on with the next slides.